you've already been participating in this apprenticeship course for 10 months now, and so you've already got a lot under your belt. But it does help to learn to think about, and the emphasis I want to put is stressing you actively engaging your own process, meaning you learning that while you are following a particular pattern, a particular procedure, that after you use that procedure, you have to trust that you are in a living, breathing universe, living, breathing consciousness that you can communicate with, in a sense. And you can learn by simply your own inner exploration. And that is how you're going to wake up, not by listening to someone else's spiel or trying to recreate what they have recreated. And that's one of the biggest difficulties that I have often with spirituality and Kriya Yoga in general, is that people, they learn about Sri Yukteswar, they learn about Yogananda, they learn about whoever it might be, and they try to keep doing what these other people have done and experience what they have done when they are not those physical individuals. You have your own path to walk, and that's the important thing. Now, lunch will be at 11:30, so we've got about 35 minutes. And what I wanted to discuss, actually, is in the newest Truth Journal. So if you haven't got it, there's copies of it over there on the counter over there. And you don't have to get it right now because we're going to go through it. But the main emphasis in this particular Truth Journal, this is October, November 2018, Mr. Davis is discussing the enduring benefits of wise, dedicated spiritual discipleship. The enduring benefits of wise, dedicated spiritual discipleship. Now, this is important because too many people get on the spiritual path and they think they're going to learn something within a week-long retreat or whatever, a year's worth of reading, and from there they're going to be able to understand everything that they need to wake up on this path. Now, that is possible. I'm not going to say that it's not. But what I have found, there have been many instances as I have had my relationship with Mr. Davis and with CSA and the whole spiritual process, is there have been many instances where I thought I figured it all out. And when you think that you have figured it all out, you tend to arrest your development. And so I would go and I would talk to Mr. Davis, and he would look at me and smile, and he never would say anything like, you're silly or you're dumb or you're an idiot. He would just look at me and say, well, let's just see how far that goes. And then I would continue in this way, thinking I had figured it all out, and then bam, something would happen which would kind of shake me out of it. And I'd realize, wait a minute, there's still so much more to learn. So the point being is that while you're on this path, while you're in this process, as long as you are here, as long as you are alive, you are going to be in a constant state of learning, of integrating the things that you learn, and moving forward. Moving forward. It's always going to be this sense of moving forward. And when you know from the very beginning that you are committed to learning, and hopefully you know someone who maybe has a little more experience from you that you can learn from consistently, you can commit to that, that is when you're going to get the most benefit out of this process. And so in the beginning of this article, Mr. Davis writes, successful discipleship is possible when we have trustworthy information that enables us to make right choices and perform effective actions. Knowing about the categories and processes of cosmic manifestation, the highest purpose of human life, and how to be self-realized, even if understanding is not flawless, is helpful. Trying to experience spiritual growth while having erroneous ideas and emotional conflicts that blur and distort awareness and interfere with rational thinking will result in frustration and disappointment. Now let's go back to the very first sentence. Successful discipleship, and discipleship simply means to be a student, right, is possible when we have trustworthy information that enables us to make right choices and perform effective actions. Now, how do you know if you have trustworthy information? Well, the way I have approached that is I try to find someone who has been around long enough to have engaged a particular process, and they've stuck with it, and that when I look at their life, it tends to reflect what I imagine someone who has more clarity, it reflects what that would actually be like. That's the first thing. The next thing is that once you find this information or find someone to learn from, the next step for me is test it out. When I first started the Kriya Yoga process, maybe like you, I had read Autobiography of a Yogi, and I was just head over heels enamored with how I was going to be a saint with 2 bodies, and I was never going to sleep again, and all these sorts of things. I learned that, well, that's not quite how it goes, but I came here to CSA, and I immediately knew that this was my path. I talk about it in that book, Kriya Yoga, Continuing the Lineage of Enlightenment, where I was probably sitting in that 3rd row, if I remember, and it was dark. I don't know why the lights were on this morning. That kind of, I wish they would have been off, would have given more atmosphere. But it was dark, and everyone was sitting down, and I sat in that 3rd row seat on the aisle there. And Mr. Davis, I heard the door open, he walked in, and he walked up, and I just was kind of overcome with emotion, and he did a little like prayer in front of the guru's pictures here, and then he sat down. And it was in that moment that I knew I was in the right place for me. Now, at the time, like I do now, I had long hair. I didn't have any tattoos, but I was definitely into loud music, and I was just getting done with college, and so I was a college kid. And Mr. Davis is this tall, well-groomed, straightforward, no BS kind of a person. So I was a bit intimidated at first, but something told me it doesn't matter the difference in your appearances or the difference in how you present yourself. You can learn from this person. And so I spent the week here. I listened to what he had to say, which were mainly stories and kind of teaching parables, I suppose. And I went back to West Virginia, because that's where I lived at the time. And I just started applying what I had learned, what I had read, what he had said was important. And I found that by doing that, it made a lot of my family uncomfortable. It made a lot of my friends uncomfortable, because I quit eating meat. I quit drinking beer, and you all know this, I've told you before. I started going to bed early and waking up early, which my friends didn't like because we weren't able to hang out so much anymore. And my wife was a night owl, so here I am saying I've got to go to bed really early and get up really early. And at one point I actually went and slept in another room because I tended to oversleep when I was in bed with her. So I made all these changes, a little bit uncomfortable, but within 6 months I recognized how it improved my state of consciousness and my understanding. So that was my way of first seeking someone out, second trying what they taught, what they discussed, and I realized at that point in time that for me, I had a trustworthy source of information. Now, again, I've been in a relationship with Mr. Davis for just about 20 years now, and there were times when I thought, why is he like that? Like, why does he do things this way? And I have learned that when I had that difficulty, as time went on, I realized why he said what he said, or why he advised what he advised, even though it made me slightly uncomfortable. So from that point forward, and that was probably about, 5 years ago when that finally dawned on me, I decided to just listen. So for me, it was an ongoing 15, 20-year process of testing information, learning and growing and staying true to the course. And the reason it's important to stay true to the course is because it's so easy to get distracted in this world. It's so easy to say, oh, well, Ryan, while I was on your YouTube channel, I happened to see this other guy with really nice gray flowing hair, and he looks like he's actually Indian, so I'm pretty sure he knows what he's talking about, and I went and learned from him. And then I start hearing all kinds of interesting things, and it just disintegrates from there. It doesn't matter who you learn from as long as you know you've got trustworthy information and that you can apply it. And if you do it consistently, you will have the ability to wake up, to grow into, as Mr. Davis called it, mental, emotional, and spiritual maturity. That's the key. This is also why when I do meditation at home by myself, I do alternate nostril breathing. I do the life force arousal technique, Kriya Pranayama, and Jyoti Mudra, or a variation of it, and occasionally some of the higher techniques that I wrote about in Kriya Yoga Vichara. That's usually if I'm sitting longer. I have done that this entire time. I have done very little variation on all of those things. And again, it's because if you can get into and follow something consistently and keep it alive, even if it seems boring or repetitious, you are learning how to focus your attention and let go of distractions. Because it's the distractions that make you think you need to do something else. Do you understand? So, successful discipleship is possible when we have trustworthy information that enables us to make right choices and perform effective actions. He goes on to say that knowing about the categories and processes of cosmic manifestation, the highest purpose of human life, and how to be self-realized, even if understanding is not flawless, is helpful. So we learn these things, and sometimes we have to trust people. Meaning, Mr. Davis can tell you, Yogananda can tell you, Sri Yukteswar can tell you, all of them can tell you what the highest purpose of human life is. Maybe you don't believe them, but there's a reason that all of these teachers say essentially the same thing. And that is, on one level, to learn, how do I put it? To learn to let go of your false sense of self. That is, if you can let go of the false sense of self, which is what all these things are about. That's why you get fearful when you start to hear the Om vibration, or when you go deep into meditation, because there's this false sense of self that says, no, pay attention to me, I am real. But what we're learning to do is to reverse that process. That's why in the Bhagavad Gita, when we discuss that in the Kriya Yoga Apprenticeship course, there's the other side of the war in the Gita that's saying, no, focus on egotism, focus on being selfish, focus on these delights, these cravings, these pleasures. And there's the other side, which when you focus on the chakras, when you focus on the spiritually enlivening energies, you start to realize those things are not real, those are false, those do not last, those are not eternal. So you learn to focus on what is eternal, what is real. And when you've been conditioned in this world long enough, it is scary to let go of those things, because you have 6,500,000,000 other people in the world telling you, no, you need to live this way because that's what makes sense. That makes sense for this world. You still have to pay your bills, take care of your body, take care of your mind, all these sorts of things, because that is what allows your body to function well so that you can process higher states of consciousness. But internally, what you're aiming to do is to learn what the highest purpose of life is and do everything that it takes to experience that, even if it's scary, even if you don't want to sometimes, even if you say, I'm comfortable now, let's just let it ride. So knowing about the highest purpose of human life is what gives a drive to make these things happen, to make them work, to accept them, to accept the grace that it is possible to wake up. That is the key. And he mentions trying to experience spiritual growth while having erroneous ideas and emotional conflicts that blur and distort awareness and interfere with rational thinking will result in frustration and disappointment. I guarantee you that is true. That is why I'm such a stickler for letting go of your fantasies, because it is those fantasies that at the end bite you in your ass, and you do it over and over again, and you wonder why you're not making any progress. It's because of some kind of fantasy you have about what this process is about and how to do it. And what it is about and how you do it is outlined in the Bhagavad Gita. It's outlined in the Yoga Sutras. That is why studying these texts consistently, always coming back to them, will keep you focused on what the point is. Otherwise, what happens? You get lazy. You start to drift. You start thinking, oh, maybe I should learn about The Secret, or maybe I should learn about some other kind of process which will allow me to have a better life, or to be more physically healthy. And you get sidetracked. All those things are secondary to the awakening process. Okay? All those things are secondary to the awakening process. And when you realize this, it will come in moments of clarity, in meditation, after meditation, when you're quiet, when you're reflective. And in the most recent talk, I don't remember if I put it in the Apprenticeship course files or if it was simply one of the YouTube videos, learning to have a conversation with God and divine consciousness helps to keep you centered. Prayer, imagining, feeling that you are talking to the absolute, your biggest sense of self, learning to engage that, to discuss whatever is going on with you, that also keeps your process alive and fresh and will allow you to randomly get insights which will properly guide you. And essentially life itself becomes a guru to you. And I remember when Melissa and I were on a Star Trek kick. We've watched every season, every variation of Star Trek possible. And the funny thing is that what I found is that whenever we would watch one of those shows, if I had earlier in the day been meditating on someone would say something in the show, like some dialogue would occur which would speak to what I was just contemplating. So even Star Trek can be your guru sometimes. But that's where the magic of it comes from, because you realize that life is living and breathing all around you. It's not just, it's not an isolated thing that you're trying to work out for yourself. All right, and this is what, when you understand that, the sense of discipleship develops possibly between a human, a teacher, but it can also develop with life itself. And that's what we want. You to have the sense of discipleship with life itself, because that's what you actually are. Okay. Now, we're going to meditate just a little bit before we go to lunch.